right. Hey, welcome back to another Akashic Moment. I'm Dr. Toya Davis, spiritual teacher, intuitive guide, and founder of Chi Healing Institute. Today's topic is one that I get a lot of questions around. It's like ancestors and the Akashic Records, right? How do those things come together? But specifically today, we're going to be looking at how to release ancestral patterns through the Akashic Records. All right. So if you've ever felt like you've been stuck in a cycle, and you're like, how did I get here? Like, I don't even consciously remember doing these things or being impacted by these or creating this idea, right? Like, some things are passed down from generations and they can shape your decisions, your emotions, your relationships. And so this episode is looking at that. We're going to talk about what ancestral patterns are, how they show up, and most importantly, how you can begin to release them using the Akashic Records. All right. So, first, before I get started, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, or share button. I'd love that, particularly if you are finding value in this episode. So, what I've been noticing is that when I do things around like ancestors, who are the ancestors, how do we work with the ancestors, understanding ancestral patterns, like that stuff gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of interest. I get a lot of follow up questions from that. And then separately, right, when I am talking about kind of the Akashic Records and being able to identify patterns and loops in the Akashic Records, that stuff gets a lot of interest. So I figured let's bring them together, right? If you have taken my Akashic Records courses, or if you work with me in the Akashic Records, you know that one of the things that I say is that the Akashic Records are not a place that we go to meet our ancestors. And I still stand firmly in that saying and hold true to that, right? The realm of the Akashic Records and what we're able to do and understand and maneuver in the records is slightly different than when we are working with our ancestors. But what we are doing when we are working to understand how to release ancestral patterns in the Akashic Records is um, looking at these particular patterns as it relates to us at soul level. And that's why the Akashic Records are the perfect place to do this work. All right. So before we begin, let's just talk big picture. What are ancestral patterns? So ancestral patterns are limited beliefs, behaviors, excuse me, fears, coping mechanisms, even emotional wounds, right? And these are things that have been passed down from one generation to the next. Sometimes these things can show up as like a chronic fear around money, even repeating relationship dynamics, right? That's a really, really big one. And something as simple as even people pleasing, right? That can also be kind of a passed down pattern. Um, and I often talk about them from the context of like societal programming, but understanding that sometimes these things are passed down to us ancestrally. Okay. But this is the important thing to note that most of these things are, because I don't want the judgment, right? We're not, excuse me, in our healing journey and our releasing journey, it's important to know that we are not approaching these ideas and concepts from the place of judgment, but truly from the place of understanding so that we can release and get to the next place. So a lot of times the patterns that have been passed, that or the patterns as they were created as a survival mechanism or a tool for survival, right? They were shaped by real experiences, and the goal for human existence is to figure out how to get to the next experience. And so in that, we develop mechanism, we develop ways to cope, we develop ways to just get through, right? There's a saying like by and by, right? We develop those ways to just be able to make it to the next thing. And the way the energetic system works, the way our even developmental system works, those things don't unfortunately just stop with the person that created them, right? And so particularly if it is a behavior or a trait that was then passed down to the child, that was then passed down to the child. And so sometimes even once the conditions that created that initial pattern, thought, emotion, belief is no longer there and no longer present, the imprint of that is still present, and you are still living that out and acting that out. Okay. Um, this is interesting. And what's coming to me now is this idea of even around like religious persecution. A lot of times I get people who want to do this work, right? Who want to do the work in the Akashic Records, who want to do really any type of work that is helping to uplift and kind of shift the trajectory of humanity, helping people to heal and release. And then they have a block. And it's like, okay, well, what is this block? Why can't I do this? And sometimes when we go in there, there could be the religious persecution, right, that has happened within the family, particularly around African diasporic traditions, right? There can be a block that's embedded in kind of your coding that says when you start making progress and one thing is like, whoa, wait a minute, danger, danger, right? The red flags start going off. And then we start to create kind of these self-sabotaging behaviors or actions to compensate for the feelings, beliefs, and things that we don't even know are playing out. So that's why it's important to understand and to kind of really say, okay, wait, what is the behavior? What is the pattern? What's happening? Why am I not moving forward? So that we can release those things and move forward, right? One of the things that is important that I feel when we are called to do the work of the ancestors, however that looks, even if we feel like I'm doing this for me, right? Or if we feel like I'm called to do this ancestor work, I don't know what it is and I don't know why. I think it's important to note that you are receiving that nudge or that download or that push or that, kind of energetic thing because you can serve as the pivot point in your lineage. And what do I mean by that? That there is something that the frequency, right, that you were on, the trajectory, the path, whatever, something about where you are in your work, in your understanding, in your alignment aligns with the work that needs to be done in the lineage. And you don't need to understand that fully. You don't need to have a really deep concept of how these things connected. Saying if you are feeling a nudge, feeling a something, right, that there's something there, and you don't need to know the full way that it looks in order to start. All right, so that was my digression. Let me bring it back. So we talked about what ancestral patterns are. Now let's talk about how the Akashic Records can help. So again, big picture framing. The Akashic Records are the energetic archive of your soul's journey, right? And every thought, deed, action, I'm missing one, but all of the things exist, right, in our Akashic Records. And because you are the representation, so you in this particular embodiment are the representation of those ancestors, right? Those traits, those characteristics, those things that got you here, the reason you chose to even be born into a particular ancestral lineage, you are able to access that kind of ancestral knowledge in a way that will help you on your trajectory. Okay. The Akashic Records hold the emotional imprints, the patterns, the energetic contracts, the vows, right, that have shaped your life. And so when you access the records with the intention of exploring the exploring these things through the lens of ancestors, you gain different spiritual insight, right? So you can understand where the pattern originated. Is this a paternal pattern? Is this a maternal pattern, right? How it has been reinforced across generations. And what your soul is asking you to do differently. And I think I want to just highlight that particular question, right? What your soul is asking of you. And why I'm highlighting that is, one, so that I'm consistent in my messaging, right? The reason we do work in the Akashic Records is so that we are able to undo and release those things that are not in alignment for our best and highest good. And so the goal is always to bring it back to ourselves. It's like, yes, I have this information. Yes, I know Uncle Charlie was a player and he had multiple wives, and we didn't have, strong relationships, and strong marriages weren't a part of my family lineage. And Uncle Charlie got it from his dad, Uncle Bill, right? Uncle Bill had the same pattern, and this person had the same pattern. And I won't say that's great for them, but understanding that is one thing. But then the question becomes, how does this apply to me? right? What about that particular pattern that I see in my ancestry relates to me in this moment and in this now? And that's how we can use the Akashic Records, okay? Because remember, they don't just show you the what, but they help you understand the why, and they can offer guidance on how to clear and shift that energy, all right? So now I'm just going to give you a few steps that you can use to start this work. All right. So first, set your intention, right? Everything starts with the intention. So this is me assuming that you are familiar with the Akashic Records and know how to open your records. But if not, ways that you can open your records include prayer. So I have the Akashic Key prayer, prayer, meditation, intention, and guided journeys, right? So any of those ways are absolutely acceptable for you to access your Akashic Records. Just be really clear on your intention when you are going in, okay? You want to ask yourself, what is the pattern that I want to explore? Okay, so I just used Uncle Charlie as my example and his pattern of philandering, and that resulting in not creating stable relationships and stable homes for the family. Okay, so what pattern do I want to explore? Where do I feel most blocked or stuck in the way that doesn't feel like this thing was mine, right? So maybe I am currently having issues speaking out at work, right? Anytime something comes up, even though like everything in me wants to address the wrong that's happening, I see something, they say, do something, say something. That's not the, I don't know. Anytime I see something, right, it's like, oh, I want to say it, but then I get ready to go and talk, and my voice just like clams up. And so I don't speak, I don't talk. But I know that this thing goes against what I normally do, right? In other aspects of my life, I am like, no, if this is wrong, I say something. So it's like, okay, why am I in this workplace not speaking up? And then you remember, wait, my mom never spoke up at work, right? And I've heard stories of, how in order to really get progress and get, when you rise in the ranks, what do you call those? Promotions. And my family, like people just really put their head down, that go along to get along mentality, right? So you might identify something that you're like, wait a minute, I don't feel like this is mine, but I'm not sure. So you can also have the intention to explore that type of thing, okay? So one, you're going to set your intention. Two, when you access or enter into your Akashic Records, you are going to ask a focused question, okay? So intention is, excuse me, intention is our thought. Like I'm grounding, I'm focused. What am I intending to get from this session? Being really clear about that. And then when you enter into the records, prayer, meditation, intention, guided journey, you are going to ask a very particular question. Why am I saying ask a focused question? Because remember, the question always determines the answer. And I don't want you to get so lost in the information that could come up. So you're going to ask a very particular question. So here are some questions that you can use. What ancestral pattern am I being invited to release right now? What is the root cause of this scarcity mindset I feel? Okay. Pay attention to what comes up. Those are just examples. Pay attention to what comes up. It might be a memory, a symbol, or a strong emotion, right? Whatever we hear, sense, see, feel, or know are valid. Trust what you receive, even if it doesn't make logical sense at first. One of the things that I find, and of course everybody's process in the records are different, but for me, information can kind of fold in on itself. No, fold out, balloons out on itself, right? So I can get that small nugget in the beginning, which might seem really random, might not seem like it makes sense, right? But the more you kind of go and build and dig, you're able to build that fuller picture. So don't question it, just trust it, okay? And then the next thing that you're going to do is, so you set the intention, you ask the focus question, you got the information, okay? Now you are going to ask, what do you need to do in order to release this pattern? Okay. What do you need to do in order to release this pattern? Also, another thing that's coming up for me right now is you can also ask, how am I carrying out this pattern in my life? Because sometimes we can't see how things are, how we're carrying things out, right? Or I might have only noticed it in the workplace, right? When I don't want to speak up. But when I ask this question, because I'm like, no, every place else I'm vocal, I say it, whatever, right? But when I ask this question, the light is being shown in a very different way. And I can possibly see in ways that I'm not conscious about how I'm carrying out this pattern. Okay. Um, and then at the end, after you feel really as complete as you can be in this process, right? You're going to just create a very simple statement. This pattern stops with me. I now choose peace, freedom, and alignment. Any version of some type of statement like that, right? But the important thing, right? The Akashic Records is not a magic button, right? We don't just get to tap the button and all things go. We still have to take action, right? So you identified in your questioning what were some other ways that you were living this particular pattern out. So now when you are faced with this situation, faced in that type of position, you could be like, oh wait, I know what this is, right? This ain't me. I know what this is. And you can make a new choice, right? You can make a new choice. All right. So, big picture, all right? The Akashic Records hold all of this information. And although it is not a place for us to go in and meet our ancestors, we can absolutely use the Akashic Records to help us identify ancestral patterns, programs, belief, contracts, vows, agreements that we are operating and carrying out in this lifetime. And we can use the records to help us understand how those things are impacting us, how they are slowing our progress, how they are keeping us in particular patterns or loops, and then release that, let that go so that we can get to the life that we want. All right. Remember that you deserve to live a life that lights you up from the inside out. And this is one tool to help you get there. Before I sign off, I want to remind you of a few things. If you are interested in learning how to access your own Akashic Records, I have a wonderful training that takes you through the process, teaches you how to ask questions, teaches you how to open and close. The link for that is in the bio, along with the books that I have to also help you through that process. All right. So releasing ancestral patterns is not a one-time event. So this thing that we just did today, you can go back and you can do it again. You can even explore the same pattern multiple times because, again, there are layers to all of it. Okay. And then you make new choices. Okay. Every time you make a different choice or you make a new choice, every time you choose something differently, you create a ripple forward and backward in your lineage. Okay. So remember I mentioned up above, you are the pivot point. Okay. So that's all I got. Till next time, stay aligned, liberated, and abundant.